गुरुर्मूर्ति पूजामूलं गुरुपदम् मन्त्रमूलं गुरुर्वाक्यम् मोक्षमूलं गुरुर्कृपा ॐ श्री गुरवे नमः।
Shrivastu, Shubhamastu. Pranams to Sri Venkateshwara and Sri Mahadeva, with all the attendant Devis and Devas in the temple, at whose feet we are meeting this evening. And my respects to all the learned ladies and gentlemen in this Sabha. I have not come here prepared for any speeches and meetings, but so incidentally it happened. Professor Kamaraju, who is a close relative and a friend of ours, has asked me to visit this temple and say a few words to the devotees gathering in the evening. Well, you have met many learned Swamijis and scholars from India, heard them elaborately on many topics, and apart from that, you are yourself well acquainted with our Indian culture and literature. Every speaker speaks not from the text that he studied, but more from his own experience. The Hinduism that we call it as a religion today has its origins in the Vedas that were revealed to the sages who sat in silence without performing anything, dwelt on a serious question. Tapas is nothing but silence and dwelling on a particular question, seeking its answer. Their question was, who is the creator? Is there a creator? What is this creation made up of? What was its past, present, and what is going to be its future? And then what are the responsibilities and duties of a human being on the earth? Are there any forefathers for this humanity? And who were they? Why did they procreate this kind of human race? And what was the intention and purpose? What is the best advice for a human being on the earth so that he is going to make use of his valuable existence on the earth? These are the basic questions of those great rishis. They are known as the Veda rishis. For example, in Rig Veda, there are as many as 607 or 8 rishis to whom, during their tapas, Vedas were revealed. If a portion of the Veda is revealed to him and he speaks it out, gives it to the world, he is known as the Rishi of that part of the Veda. On every chapter at the beginning, Chandas and Rishi are named at the beginning of every Suktam. So they are not the writers or inventors of Veda. they received a knowledge in total silence with a question. Whatever question that they entertained in their mind was in the interest of the welfare of the mankind. They had nothing to seek for themselves. They had no desires. They were a kind of self-fulfilled, desireless, and a man with long vision for the future good of the mankind. That is known as Veda iti Vedaha. It is defined as something that allows you to know, tells you what cannot be otherwise obtained, either by research or observation of the surrounding universe. No, they are not the paths, they are not the ways of knowing this universe at all. Yes, the modern science is observing the surrounding universe with the aid of mathematics, astronomy, physics, and so many sciences. But still, whatever has been revealed in the last few centuries is a lot of material about the distance, the way, the paths of motion, movement, and things like that. It's most study of astronomy, not the origins of creation. Astronomy is a fundamental science that is revealing many things which we have no idea about it. Man has walked on the earth and going to walk on Mars also. Undoubtedly, it is a great achievement. Science and technology has totally influenced our lives in the past 100 years more than the earlier centuries. It's a great achievement on the earth by the man, by human effort and investigative sciences. But the basic question is, how does this knowledge that has been revealed in the shape of science and technology as a result of research, how does it help the human being to live a better life? Does it have a relevance to our problems of living? Does it have a solution to our problems? Does it guide us what to do and what not to do in our lives? Does it make a human being a better one, a more contented, satisfied man, more knowledgeable about himself? So it has its no direct relevance to the happiness or growth of the humankind. Vedas revealed long before Ramayana times have given us a path to understand. But this is how we have come to exist. We have come to live on the earth as a human being, and you are our child. We are your progenitors. We are the rishis who revealed the knowledge for your good. This knowledge has come to us not from our imagination, not by creative genius, but it has revealed itself by the grace of the creator of this universe. It is meant to benefit you with better wisdom to live on. Now, what is the essence of this? Coming to the conclusion, we have gone through the Vedic times when yajna was the predominant way of life. Then the tapas was the most important engagement that all intellectual investigators engaged in. And then we have now ultimately come down to the Puranic religion. We are living in is what are we doing every day by day throughout the year? What are the festivals that we are observing? All this is traceable to the Puranic literature. So we can say Vedic religion, then the tapasic approach to the ultimate truth, and then day-to-day religious practice is more defined by our Puranas plus the Dharma Shastras and things like that. This is a way of life. Not all Hindus are acquainted with the Vedas, nor even the Smritis and Shastras, but we are guided by the Puranic knowledge. Puranas are the essence of Vedas, they say. Now, what is the ultimate advice? What is the analysis of the human life? Is the basic question before us. I would not take more than another 15 or 16 minutes. The essence of it is we have two mainstreams of life. One mainstream is the destiny. Destiny is nothing but the result of our past actions. So destiny is the force which is guiding us, making us act, making us experience good and bad, happiness and otherwise. So destiny is guiding our life day by day, minute to minute. But the other mainstream of force that we are yet to reveal to ourselves for our own benefit is the presence of God. Destiny is inevitable. One has to go through the results of his past karma. He has no choice. But then is it absolutely inevitable, insurmountable? Can it not be amended? Can it not be changed? Yes. The reply is yes. There is a force that is the Creator, the God, pervasive all over. There is no place without God. For example, Shaivism, they say, Shivetara Padartha Nasti. There is no place, there is no element without Shiva. So this kind of all-pervasive Shiva or Rudra Mahadeva or Mahavishnu is the one God. So what is his importance? He is the maker of the law of destiny. He is not directly interfering with your day-to-day life. He is not influencing, he is not with you, not watching you individually. He has no direct relationship with any individual as to one-to-one relationship. It is a general, absolutely all-pervasive, deep truth. So you have to go through the destiny that has been already ordained by the lawmaker, that is the God. Therefore, to make your life more meaningful, more tolerable, more pleasant, more purposeful, more meaningful, you have to approach the God to know who you are, the kind of creature that we are living on this earth as a result of our own past karma. If it is inevitable, there is no way of escaping from the karma. Then what is this? You are a creature. But the Shastras say, yes, you can certainly conquer your own karma by approaching the God. Karma does not conquer karma. Karma is conquered by God. He is the creator, he is the lawmaker. It is, then the question arises, why did he make this creation? Was it for his just pleasure? Now some of them people say, just for his Leela Matram. No, it is not Leela. He does not need any pleasure game of creating anything. He is happiness and bliss and Ananda himself. There is no other action in which he has to enter to make to find happiness. So he is self-sufficient. He is Ananda Rasa himself. So he created this creation in order to allow the billions of jivas that are waiting to be evolved. They are waiting to be evolved. They are waiting to be born. They are waiting to be experience the creation, the prakriti. So that is known, therefore, creation is known as the anugraha, the kindness, the grace. Where were these jivas? Yes, they were there, endless. You go to Puranas and Shastras, the one definition is billions of jivas are already there in absolute darkness, waiting for the creation, waiting to be born as creatures, waiting to be born with senses and bodies, so that the jivatma evolves. And what is the path? Through many births, after a sort of evolution, the jivatma reaches the God and gets merged. So the Creator is the ultimate goal of all the jivas in whom they have to merge, never to return into any loka. So there is a very elaborate creation with 14 lokas, which is known as the Brahmanda. And then Brahmanda is also explained in the Puranas and Shastras and Vedas also. The process of creation is described in the Purusha Suktam, Manu Suktam. Then there are many other suktas which are creating they explain the process of creation. Nasadiya Suktam is another very important Suktam in Vedas. So there is a very logical explanation of the reason for creation, the process of creation, the purpose of creation, and what is expected of you for your own good. Not that we can do something good for the entire creation. Absolutely no. We are responsible unto ourselves. We are responsible for our own future welfare. We have to elevate ourselves to ultimate wisdom and ultimately get lost in the ultimate truth, that is the God. And God is defined as Brahman in some place, and God as a creator with qualities, form. As Hinduism believes there is only one God, it is a theory that supports all literature in Hinduism. There is one God for many purposes. That is the Karya Brahmas. There are no Karya Brahmas. There are all the gods are part of one God. They are performing their duties in various lokas as ordained by the Creator. So not every aspect of God is God itself. So we can worship any form of God and reach the ultimate form of the truth about God through the worship of any form of God. There is no superior or inferior forms of God that is made by the people who enunciated many theories and things like that. There is a great rich literature we have. You remember about 500 years before Christ, Buddha was born, and he introduced, he created a storm in this kind of Hindu society. Hindu society was not all in a bad shape, as many people imagine. It was in a good shape. The Varna Dharma and Ashrama Dharma were in good shape. Vedas were being studied, yajnas were being performed. Caste system was observed scrupulously, without any complaint. There was justice for all, and all were believing in God and their responsibility to elevate themselves. But then the basic theory was no man can reach the God in one life after his sankalpa. That is the general belief. It is possible also in exceptional cases. There are many people, even bad people, approach God, reach the God in one life itself. That's depend on the depth of remorse and things like that. So the Buddha thought that why not I give a shortcut to this moksha? In one life itself, why not they reach the ultimate truth? Let me not call the ultimate truth as God. No need to believe in God. There need not be a God at all. But there is an ultimate truth where the long chain of rivers would come to a halt. I will give a shortcut. This is my path. I have myself achieved that ultimate truth in my own experiment. Therefore, I give the benefit of that experiment to all mankind. And he believed in Sangha, that is, hundreds of people form a society and a group. The group reaches the God or the ultimate truth as a group, not as an individual. But the basic law is no, only individual can reach the ultimate truth, not as a group, as a company, or as an association of a few people. It's not. Every soul is individual in its journey. Every human being is performing his own long journey from birth to birth. He is not accompanied by anybody. He has no friends and relatives in his spiritual journey. He reaches. So all people, in that sense, are lonely, alone. They are making their own journey on their own. They are not being accompanied by anybody. So, well, that is the basic truth about moksha. Buddha thought, why not I give hundreds and thousands of people one path, all of them can ultimately get merged in the ultimate truth. That failed. That is not the basic truth. But Hindus have accepted him as avatar because he is a jnani. He is a released soul. He knows, he experiences the truth. But he himself has said, I have passed through 442 births for to reach this stage. The same will apply to that. Therefore, in Hinduism, every individual is asked to help himself. Take the path of what we call spirituality is thinking of God, try to reach the God, wishing to reach the God, do whatever you can in the process, as your Guru ordains. So this is besides the primary force that governs our life, which is karma or the destiny. There is the presence of God. Why not you conquer your karma and the karma of others also if you can by approaching the God. God is meant just open for one and all, whether you are a preacher or a human being or a Hindu or Muslim, all are just souls passing through the result of their destinies. So God is the ultimate goal to every soul. Through whatever religion, whatever theory you may have, there are systems of philosophy, Dvaita, Advaita, Visishtadvaita, Yoga. There are many paths. All paths have one purpose and one goal in teaching you how to reach the ultimate truth. And then cessation of this chain of rebirth, get released from this kind of birth and death and inevitability of the soul till he is delivered. Anything that is born today is bound to die tomorrow. So there is no pleasure, there is no happy in the ultimate analysis. We may have some kind of pleasure, success, happiness, enjoyments and things like that. But there are sorrows also. That's part of life. There's nothing like absolute happiness, total success, total enjoyment. That's it. Just an imagination. It's myth. There's nothing like it. All of us are supposed to increase the punyam or the better, the merits of our past and reduce the sinner part of it. Reduce what was wrong in our actions. The power of it on our present day must be reduced. The influence of our past evil action must be wiped out by dharma, by prayer, by thinking of the God's name. Almost every second in life, every breath must be accompanied by the name of God and thought of God as much as one can. There is no distinction between one man and the other. The caste system does not apply to the Moksha Vijaya. Moksha Vijaya deals with only the individual soul. And then the social organization like Varna Dharma or Ashrama Dharma, that is slowly waning. It is not waxing. It is now slowly becoming weaker and weaker. But so far as the spiritual path of the Hindus are concerned, that has no decline in any sense. Whether Varnashrama Dharma is still valid or not, that's a different question. It is not relevant to the spiritual path. It is a social organizational setup. Well, it may not have any relevance in the future times. There is neither a perfect Brahmin nor a Sudra at all. So we are slowly becoming united in our way of life. It's not bad, it may be the order of times. But why not? Why not there should be a single caste? Why not all the Hindus become Brahmins by quality? The God can help us, the Shastras can help us. All people need not become just Sudras and innocent, ignorant people. By quality, by training, by guidance, by association with learned people, entire Hinduism can become the uppermost caste by quality. It's not possible. I wish that one day we become one single caste of superior quality of heart, mind, and intelligence and analytical capability. But ultimately the point is, let us conquer our karma by good deeds, by the help of God. Help of God, approaching God to conquer your own karma is a very small thing. You can conquer the karma of many others also. That is what great rishis, great men did. So our approach should be thinking of God, whatever name or form you have. If you can concentrate on a formless God, nameless God, welcome. Anything is only puja, the annual rituals, repeated rituals annually is a calendar that we Hindus have their own calendar. It could be observed. That is known as called the tradition. Tradition has its own value. It doesn't allow us to forget our roots. Tradition must be kept up wherever we go, wherever we are, and what all circumstances we may go through is a part of destiny. Destiny is very powerful on the human life, but that is not more powerful than the thought of God. That is what we have to expect in this modern world. India has its own wonderful message to the world in the past and future also. There may be a day going to dawn when India's message about human life and the purpose would be heard by the entire world. Let us hope for it. In fact, I visualize sometimes Hindu thought would be able to conquer in arguments in the thought of any other religion or sect of philosophy. But then, in the 6th or 7th, after Buddha, there was a confusion for about 9 centuries. Shankaracharya was born. He propounded the theory of Advaita and he commented on all the 3 important texts, Bhagavad Gita, Upanishads, and Brahma Sutras, given to us by Vyasa. So established with wonderful logic and reasoning that there is only one truth, That is known as the Parabrahman. The God is a visual representation of that Parabrahman. That visual form that we see is not the Brahman, it is the Maya. It is the creative force behind all the creation. But there are Advaita, Brahma Vidya, Brahma, Satyam, that is the only truth. That is what is fleeting for a minute. I mean, we were born some years ago, I will not be there in the near future. How can I be a truth? What is fleeting in time? Time is consuming us. What is coming and going, it cannot be the truth. What is permanent is the only truth. That is Brahman. Brahman is the cause and the origin of creation. Creation is Maya. In the Maya creation also, Brahman does exist. He is not absent from it. On the same basis, we say even the God pervades everything. Shiva is everywhere, in every atom, every molecule, every item. Why? In all the 5 elements. Not only in our physical body, every atom contains that the presence of God. Not only that, our manas, buddhi, chitta, ahankara, indriya, karyas, all these things are the Mayic aspect of that one God. Therefore, it is the God that is pervading it. That God is not absent anywhere. So we have the Puranas talking about the tapas of the Rakshasas also. Rakshasas did more powerful tapas than the rishis. But what's the result? They got their boons, which are more destructive in nature to themselves and to the world around. The tapas can be for the purpose of obtaining a boon from the God or Brahma or Shiva. But that is not moksha, that is not jnana. It may be leading to a destructive process. So it can be misused. Tapas is Shakti, tapas is jnana, tapas is power, tapas is sankalpa. So that is ultimately, we have to worship God physically, praise Him for His great quality. There is an abundant literature which can be utilized for worshipping of the God. There is a great literature of philosophy which tells us how to think of God, what to meditate upon. These things are all available. We must make full use of our literature. Let us go back to our fundamentals of literature and the in-depth message of literature, of Hindu literature. We have a future. The Hindu philosophy, Hindu way of life is indestructible. It is not born on a day with one prophet or someone. Therefore, what is not born on a day cannot be destroyed, cannot disappear in this world. So then we have to go back to our roots. We cannot afford to lose our knowledge of our roots. That's the most valuable knowledge that we have to acquire, not forgetting it. We have to teach our children about our heritage and visit our motherland as many times as possible. Acquaint ourselves with the learned men, senior people who are qualified to teach. I know many great men are coming here, teaching you many things, valuable things. But that should be thought upon. We have to dwell upon those subjects mentally. We have to pay our attention more seriously to our heritage. Heritage is the real wealth. You may become a billionaire by virtue of your hard work. But it has its own value, but at a limited level. What is invaluable is our heritage. Heritage enriches you, makes your life more meaningful, better understood. I must understand why I am living. Better understood living is really worth living. Living in ignorance, dying in ignorance is a terrible loss of a valuable lifetime. That should not happen in the case of a Hindu at all, whatever be or somebody who has some pay, respect and attention to the Hindu philosophy can make use of it. It doesn't depend on the religion in which you are born, the caste in which you are born, the place where you are born. These things, they don't matter. Your personal attention, taking these things seriously, it can enrich your life. Life is worth living only when it is devoted to better understanding of the secrets of life and creation. Otherwise, life is just mechanical and a physiological existence without much of outcome. And I have been given wonderful opportunity to speak to you for this long. And I am grateful to you, the authorities of the temple, Mr. Kamaraj and other friends who are responsible for my coming here and sitting before you for this time. I wish the God in whose presence we are meeting will take care of us, make us more serious thinkers about ourselves, and they grace our inner life far better, far more seriously than the external part of our life. External part, manas, buddhi, wealth, coming and going, long life. These are all result of karma. And yet, even if you are not interested in the spiritual secrets of life, you can make your life happy by punyam, merit. Give charity to the poor people. Make poor people happy by some good actions. Serve the poor, serve the country. The country is badly in need of services, charity. That itself, one may not believe in God, I always say, but we have to believe in the human being. Serve the humanity with charity. God is pleased, even if you don't believe in Him. God is extremely kind to you, even when you don't worship Him or believe in Him, but when you serve the mankind. Charity itself is a punyam. Through merit, we can realize that there is a presence. First realization is that there is a God. That is a realization. That's a strong belief. I know you must be able to say there is a God. Then what I am reaching Him. These are all the things. There is a voluminous literature which enriches our lives. And I think the only future school of thought, religion, that finally exists even in the future coming centuries is the Hindu thought. May not be in there. Let us pray for the good of mankind. Let us also pray that this nation, this great country, America, should prosper, must come out of its economic distressful problems. They should, because they have given us shelter, welcomed our presence here. We have prospered here, having come all the way. We should be grateful, thankful, and pray for the prosperity of this country. Let there be no trouble of any kind. Let there be no internal problems like unemployment, things like that. Let our God save this country. The God whom we worship in this temple, let that God be kind to this country which has given us shelter. Thank you.